Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On the podcast today, we have stories. How about a beast that collects spaceships?
No, this can't be happening.
Well, it kinda can. The 90s classic song Kiss Me has a story.
Cool, man!
Tom from Germany is back with a ghost phone. And we hear a story about a shadow man that's not all that bad.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Pretty rare. So, if you're up for it, let's get things rolling with this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by the silent witness or really bad alibis. If you believe the first, then the second is sure to follow, or vice versa. I personally like to have my witnesses be alive and my alibis to be sound. Now, this will all make sense later.
City editor.
Is Tom Jackson?
Yes, who's this?
Keep this under your hat, Jackson, and you'll have a front-page story.
What is this, a gag?
You won't think so when I tell you this is Rocky Stebbins.
Well, and where have you been hiding out? You know the whole police force is looking for you?
Yeah, I know.
Did you pull off that job at the bank and kill that guard?
That's what I want to see you about. I had nothing to do with it. And I want your paper to print the story. Can I come up and see you?
Sure. What have I got to lose except my job? Anyone see you come in here, Stebbins?
Not a soul. I even doubled back to make sure. Now, you're a square guy, Jackson, and I'm telling you the facts. I got an alibi.
Yeah, let's hear your dream.
The bank job was pulled off at 2 o'clock, see? At that time, I'm someplace else.
Any witnesses?
I got a silent witness.
Yeah, who?
It ain't a who, it's a what. I saw the explosion and the fire at the United Oil Company tanks this afternoon.
Yeah, where were you when they blew up?
I was up on top of Lookout Mountain when I saw the whole thing happen.
What was the exact time the explosions began?
It was 2:15. You know, I couldn't get from the bank to the mountain in 15 minutes.
Yeah, not very well. More than 10 miles to the foot of the mountain, and then that walk uphill takes a good half hour.
And how?
But why would I believe that you were on top of that mountain when the United States tanks blew up?
I can give you an eyewitness description.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, it was such a swell day that I decided to spend the afternoon on the mountain looking out at the sights.
Cut it out, Rocky. Get to the explosion.
Okay. Well, I'm looking south, see, away from the tanks at the time it happens. All of a sudden, I start hearing some blasting. I turn around quick to the tanks, and some more explosions is tearing the air apart. But I don't see nothing. After one more blast, I suddenly see flames and smoke start pouring up from the tanks. Then some more explosions, then some more fire. It was the most horrible thing I ever seen in my whole life. My ears was coming off.
Yeah, so are mine right now.
Huh? What do you mean?
Simply that your alibi is the biggest cock and bull story I've heard in a long time. Now stay where you are, Rocky. I'm calling the police.
What mistake did Rocky Stebbins make in the telling of his alibi? In just a moment we'll know, but first...
What the heck? It sounded good, but something is very wrong here. Why not just pay someone to be your alibi rather than try to convince someone that you saw a bomb blast? Now, having said that, telling someone you saw something is not an alibi, which probably means our criminal is an idiot. But hey, being an idiot is not a crime.
And now, back to our mystery.
You were doing fine until you hit the climax of your story. Then it fell apart completely. You forgot one little fact that every schoolboy learns. The scientific law that light travels faster than sound.
So what?
So you said that first you heard the explosions and then you saw the fire, which, my friend, is an impossibility. Light goes at the speed of 186,000 miles per second, while sound only travels 700 miles per hour. The fire would have been seen first, and the explosions heard a few seconds later.
A guy ain't got a chance. If it ain't one kind of law, it's another.
Okay, Another attempt to use science in a situation that calls for none of it. He's quite right, though. Light does travel faster than sound. However, the guy said it took several blasts before he saw it, which could simply mean that the blast was not visible from his location straight away. Still, it's a really bad alibi, and I think he probably should have stayed in hiding. So, what did we learn? Well, this mystery was brought to you by a really bad alibi.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
I love stories, and I would guess I spend half my day, every day, listening to them or reading them. Whether it's news, sports, paranormal, or just plain funny, I love them all. This is not a new thing and has only grown into an obsession as I get older. Is it healthy? I would like to think so. Our first story this time, well, I'm going to let Joey from Orlando, Florida, tell you more. Oh, for the record, if you are an Echo Alexa owner, now would be a good time to use that mute button. Hello, Ron. I've become quite a huge fan of the podcast since I discovered it on TuneIn Radio a couple months ago. I wanted to share a little story with you, and it's not scary or of the supernatural or anything like that. It's just plain old funny. Funny, but a true story. I often listen to music in my car through Amazon using Alexa to play what I want to hear. I wanted to hear the 90s song Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer. Okay, sue me. I like the song. Anyway, I asked Alexa to play that saying the title and the artist. That seemed to be a lot for Alexa to understand at once, so it asked me to repeat my request. I thought I would simplify it if I just said the song title. So I just said out loud, "Alexa, kiss me." Alexa then responded with,
"I like you as a friend."
I'd love it if you read that story on the show. I would hope that it would make people get a laugh. Well, thanks so much for your show, and I will be listening. God bless. Joey Martinez, Orlando, Florida. Well, Joey, I did laugh. When I recorded this story, I didn't mute my Echo. And when I got to the phrase, "Alexa, I like you as a friend," she responded,
"Thanks. I like you too."
By the way, if it's a crime to like the song Kiss Me, then please cuff me now. It's a cute song and a personal guilty pleasure. Thank you, Joey. Our second story comes from our friend in Germany, Tom Williams. He calls it very simply wishful thinking. Hello, Ron, family, and listeners. An odd thing happened yesterday that I can't logically explain nor file away under just wishful thinking. I don't mean to drag this out, but I do have to give you all of the details in order for you to get the full picture. Many years ago here in Germany, even local phone calls were charged for on a call-per-call basis. It wasn't much, but 5 cents per call can mount up. As my wife's schoolmate and longtime friend Elfie moved into the apartment adjacent to ours, we decided to install our very own internal phones in order to not pay those extra charges. This system was not in any way going through the usual landline. The system was wireless and can only be used between the two phones, one in each of our apartments. As I mentioned to you, Ron, my wife Sue died of cancer 3 months ago. Weeks before her death, she asked me not to be sad because she would always be around even after her death. All these weeks of grief and no sign of her as she had promised. Her friend Elfie said that my wife was adjusting to her new life on the other side and would, in time, somehow send a message or a sign. Anytime Elfie has problems with her computer, I go next door and help her. I always told my wife to call on the internal phone if she needed me or when lunch was ready. This system worked perfectly for 14 years. Yesterday, I was next door with Elfie in a conversation about my wife. Suddenly, the internal's phone display lit up and the phone rang. With a shocked look on her face, she picked up the receiver and answered the phone. No one spoke. She hung up and sat back down at the table. Immediately, the phone rang again. Same thing. No one answered. After a moment, Elfie looked up at me and said, "There's your sign from Sue." After observing this overnight, I do believe that Elfie was right, and it was a sign. Tom from Berlin. Well, Tom, all I can say that as a believer in the fact that there is another side, I have no doubt that Elfie was right. What better way to let you know that you are still loved and missed? Thank you for sharing your story with us. Our last story this week comes from Julie Marks, Odessa, Texas. Julie has been a resident of Odessa since her college days at the University of Texas. Go Longhorns! She calls her story, Dad Makes a House Call. First, I have to say that I've had experiences with ghosts and spirits all of my life, but I've always ignored them as being my imagination as a child or extreme stress as an adult. I did not fully embrace these experiences until a lady claiming to be a psychic came up to me in a hotel. She advised me that spirits tend to follow me around, and she handed me a prayer card. The lady went on to say that she's been holding on to it since she was a very young girl. She was told by her grandmother that she would know when to give it away. Also, to give it to someone who is sensitive to things and who struggles to understand them. So, she gave it to me. Now, I've had experiences all over the country, but this particular one happened at my sister's house. My sister also lives in Odessa, although she'll never admit that her house is what you would call haunted. The master bedroom is extremely cold. It's never warm no matter what time it is. Her water faucets turn on by themselves, and she has problems with anything electric in that house. Her pets act extremely strange. They seem to follow things around the house. They're not even there. I recently spent the night there and could not bring myself to fall asleep. I had a feeling that someone was watching me. I finally got up and lay on the couch in the living room. My sister's cat promptly sat beside me, and we both dozed off. I woke up out of a dead sleep because I felt like something was watching me. From the couch, I could see a shadow figure standing there. At first, I thought I was seeing things, but as soon as I saw the figure move, the cat reacted to it as if he saw it too. He got up, ran towards it, and then promptly ran away. I spoke to it. As soon as my voice broke the silence of the room, the shadow faded, and I felt at peace. Our father had passed away recently. I've seen his spirit in my house and heard him calling my name at times. I honestly believe that this was my dad checking in on my sister. I think he was as surprised to see me as I was to see him. I didn't ever tell my sister any of this. It would only upset her, but she has to know that her house is very haunted. Great story, Julie, and I thank you for sharing it. I love family ghost stories. While they're still very scary, there's also that element of warmth. I've never heard a shadow story quite like this one. Most of the time, they're of a malevolent nature. Well, That's all the stories for this week. I have more on tap for next time, including another head-scratcher from my very own brother that can't possibly be true. Can it? If you want to hear your story on Ron's Amazing Stories, head to the website and click on the Story Submission banner. Julie did that, Tom used email, and Joey used the contact page. Thanks again to all three of you. The date is May 7th, 1945, and this is A Moment in Time.
This is the BBC Home Service. We're interrupting programs to make the following announcement. It is understood that in accordance with arrangements between the three great powers, an official announcement will be broadcast by the Prime Minister at 3 o'clock tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon, the 8th of May. In view of this fact, tomorrow, Tuesday, will be treated as Victory in Europe Day and will be regarded as a holiday. The day following, Wednesday, the 9th of May, will also be a holiday. His Majesty the King will broadcast to the peoples of the British Empire and Commonwealth tomorrow, Tuesday, at 9 p.m. British double summertime.
The voice you just heard was John Snagg and was broadcast on May 7th, 1945, which was one day before the Victory in Europe Day. This celebrated the formal acceptance of Nazi Germany's unconditional surrender to the Allies of World War II. Now, in case you didn't do the math, that was 73 years ago, almost to the day. How about that?
As read by Amazing Stories, read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have The Beast of Space by F.E. Hardart. It first appeared in Comet Magazine in the July edition, 1941. This is a fantastic tale that could only happen in space. As I find these stories, I'm becoming more and more a fan of them. I hope that you enjoy them too. Imagine being a one-armed man fighting a bonafide space monster. The story is called The Beast of Space and is read for us by the amazing voice of Mark Nelson. Thank you, Mark.
The Beast of Space by F.E. Hardart. Here the dark cave, along which Nat Starrett had been creeping, broadened into what his powerful searchlight revealed to be a low, wide, smoothly circular room. At his feet lapped black, thick-looking waves of an underground lake, a pool of viscous substance that gave off a penetrating, poignant odor of acid, sweetish and intoxicating, unlike any acid he knew. The smell rolled up in a sickening, sultry cloud that penetrated his helmet, made him cough and choke. Near its center projected from the sticky stuff what appeared to be the nose of a spaceship. He looked down near his feet at the edge of the pool where thick, slowly moving tongues of the liquid appeared to reach up toward him as if intent on pulling him into its depths. As each hungry wave fell back, it left a slimy, snake-like trail behind. Now came a wave of strange music such as he had never heard before. Faintly, it had begun some time back, so faintly he was barely aware of it. Now it swelled into a smooth, impelling wail, lulling him into drowsiness. He did not wonder why he could hear through the soundproof space helmet he wore. He ceased to wonder about anything. There was only the strange sweetness of the acid and the throbbing music. Abruptly, the spell was broken by something shrilling in his brain, sending little chills racing up and down his spine. Digger, a small, oddly canine-like creature with telepathic powers, a space dweller which men found when they first came to the asteroids. The relationship between space hounds and men was much the same as between man and dog in the old Earthbound days. Appropriate name for the beast, Digger. With those large, incredibly hard claws, designed for rooting in the metal makeup of the asteroids for vital elements, the space hound could easily have shredded the man's spacesuit and helmet, could, at any time, tear huge chunks out of men's fine ships. The half-conscious man jerked his thin form erect. His mouth, which had gaped loosely, closed with a snap into firm lines. "She isn't in this hell-hole, Digger. You wouldn't expect her to be where we could find her easily." Scooping the small beast up under his good arm, he quickly climbed the steep, slimy slope of the cave. The other arm in his suit hung empty. That empty arm in the spacesuit told the story of an Earthman become voluntarily exile, choosing the desolation of space to the companionship of other humans who would deluge him with unwanted sympathy. The space hound was friendly in its own fashion. Fortunately, such complex things as sympathy were apparently outside its abilities. The two could interchange impressions of danger, comfort, pleasure, discomfort, fear, and appreciation of each other's company, but little more. Whether or not the creature could understand his thoughts, he could not tell. As he went on, he reviewed, mentally, the events leading up to his landing here. The sudden appearance on his teleview screen of the face and slim shoulders of a girl. Her attractiveness plainly distinguishable through her helmet. For a moment, he forgot that he disliked women. The call for help cut short, but not before he had learned that, apparently, she was being held prisoner on asteroid Moira. He knew he'd have to do what he could, even if it meant unwanted company for an indefinite length of time. The spell was gone soon after her face vanished. He remembered former experiences with attractive-looking girls. Damn traditions. A change in his course and a landing on asteroid Moira. Here he'd found a honeycomb of caves, all leading from one large main tunnel. The cavern walls had been of a translucent, quartz-like substance, ranging in color from yellowish-brown to violet-gray. It looked vaguely familiar, yet he could not place it. There was not time to examine it more carefully. The room in which he had found the evil, hungry lake had been the first one to the right. Now he crossed to the opening in the opposite wall. The mouth of this cave was much larger, wider than the other. He stood in the opening, slowly swung the beam of his torch around the smooth walls, still holding Digger, who by now was indicating that he'd like to be set down. Nat released him unthinkingly, his mind fully taken up with what the light revealed. Spaceships. The room was packed with them, all sizes, old and new. A veritable sargasso. At first, he thought they might be craft belonging to nameless inhabitants of this world, but as he approached them, he recognized terrestrial identifications. The first was a scout ship of American Spaceways. Nat recognized the name, Ceres, remembered a telecast account of its disappearance in space. There was a neat little reward for information as to its whereabouts. Nat's lips curled in derision. It wouldn't equal the expense of his journey out here. There was a deep groove in the smooth material of the floor where the ship had been dragged through the doorway into the room. What machines could have done this work without leaving their own traces? He went to the other ships. All were small, mostly single or two-passenger craft. The last entry in the logs of many was to the effect that they were about to land on the asteroid Moira to rescue a girl held captive there. None had crashed. All ships were in perfect order, but all were deserted. 2 doors were gone from the interior of one of the vessels. They might have been removed for any of 100 reasons, but why here? Nat's glance swept around the room, came to rest on the figure of a heavy-duty robot of familiar design. Semi-human in form, it looked like some misshapen, bent, headless giant. He inspected it. Myers Robot, Inc., Earth designed for mining operations on Mars. "Well, Digger, I can see now how these ships were brought in here. That robot could move any of one of these with ease. But that doesn't explain where the humans have gone. It might be space pirates using this asteroid for a base, or it might be some alien form of life. We're still free. Shall we beat it, or stay and try to check this out?" He did not know how much of this got over to the Space Hound, but the impressions he received in answer were those of approving their remaining where they were. "I suppose the best system is to explore the rest of the caves in order. Let's go." Followed by Digger, he walked quietly toward the next cave on the left, slipped through the doorway, and standing with his back against the wall, swung the light of his torch in a wide, swift arc about the room. Halfway around, he stopped abruptly. A slim, petite figure appeared clearly in the searchlight's glare. The girl he had seen on the televisor stood in the middle of the room, facing a Telecaster, her back toward him. She did not seem aware of him as he moved forward. What could be wrong? Surely that light would arouse her. The figure did not turn as he approached. So near was he now that he could seize her easily. Still, she made no move. Nat stepped to one side, flashed his torch in her face. Her beautifully lashed eyes stared straight ahead unblinkingly. The expression on her lovely composed face did not change. A robot. He laughed bitterly. But then, he was not the only one. She was an Earth product. Nat opened her helmet and found the trademark of Spurgeon's Robots hung like a necklace about her throat. But whoever had lured him here easily could have removed her from one of the vessels in the front cave. It did not seem like the work of pirates, more likely unknown intelligent beings. He turned to examine the televisor. It too was an Earth product. The mechanism was of old design. Evidently, it had been taken from the first of the ships to land here. Outside of the Telecaster and the solitary robot, there was nothing to be seen in this cave. A sound behind him. He whirled, heat rod poised for swift, stabbing action. Nothing, except small bowling ball things rolling in through a narrow door. Ridiculous things of the same yellowish quartz material as composed the cave walls. At regular intervals, a dull bluish light poured forth from rounded holes in their smooth sides. And issuing forth from within these comic globes was the same weird, compelling music he had heard before. They rolled up to him, brushed against his toes. A shrilling in his brain told him that Digger was aware of them. "Back, Digger," he thought, as he drew away from the globes. They poured their penetrating blue light over him, inspectingly, while the music from within rose and fell in regular cadences, sweetly impelling and dulling to the senses as strong oriental incense. But Digger was not soothed. The Space Hound lunged at one of the globes. Instead of slashing its sides, he found himself sailing through the air toward it. Nat received impressions of irritation combined with astonishment. Within the globes, the music rose to a furious whine, while one of the things shot forth long tentacles from the holes in its side. Lightning swift they shot forth, wrapped themselves about the body of the Space Hound, constricting. Digger writhed vainly, his claws powerless to tear at the whip-like tentacles. Nat severed the tentacles at their base with a heat beam. He turned, strode toward the door, watching the spheres apprehensively out of the corner of his eye, ready to jump aside should they roll toward him suddenly. But they followed at respectful distances, singing softly. Before he reached the door, he found himself walking in rhythm to the music, his head swaying. It came slowly, insidiously. Before he was aware, his body no longer obeyed his will. Muscles refused to move other than in coordination with the music. His arm relaxed, the heat rod sliding from his grasp. But Digger, the space hound, sent out a barrage of vibrations that fairly rocked his brain out of his skull. Simultaneously, the beast attacked the nearest globes, tearing fiercely at them. Rapidly, the others rolled away, but two lay torn and motionless, the music within them stilled. Nat reached down, retrieved the heat rod. "I think we better look for a squeaker. Next time, they might get you, Digger." They returned to the room of the spaceships, seeking one of the small, portable radio amplifiers used for searching out radium. It was known as a squeaker because of the constant din it made while in use. The noise would cease only when radium was within 100 feet of the mechanism. He found one after searching a few of the smaller ships. With the portable radio strapped to his back, power switched on, he started again down the main tunnel. The globes set up their seductive rhythms as before, but he could not hear them above the discord of his squeaker. Failing to lure him as before, they sought to force him in the direction they desired him to go by darting at him suddenly, lashing him with their tentacles. But it was a simple thing to elude them. Still remained the question, why could they want to lure him into that stinking pool of acid? He flashed a beam of heat at the nearest of the annoying globes. Under the released energy it glowed, yet did not melt. But the tentacles sheared off, and the blue lights faded. The flow of music changed to shrill whines, as of pain, and its rolling ceased. The others drew back. He turned down another tunnel. They stopped at the cave beyond the one where he had found the robot girl. It was sealed by a locked door, one of the airlock doors from that space vessel, firmly cemented into the natural opening of the cave. Nat bent forward, listening, his helmeted head pressed against the door. No sound. He was suddenly aware of the dead silence that pressed in on him from all sides now that the globes no longer sang, and his squeaker had been turned off. The powerful energy of his heat beam sputtered as it melted the lock into incandescent droplets which sizzled as they trickled down the cold metal of the door. The greasy quartz-like material at the side of the door glowed in the heat from his rod, but no visible effect upon it could be seen. What was that material? He knew, yes, he knew, but he could not place a mental finger on it. He thrust the shoulder of his good arm against the heavy door, swung it inwards, stepped inside. The light of his torch pierced the silence, picked out a human skeleton in one corner. He hurried toward it. No, it was not entirely a skeleton as yet. The flesh and bone had been eaten away from the lower part of the body to halfway up the hips, as though from some strong acid. The rest of the large, sturdy frame lay sunken under the remains of a spacesuit, which was tied clumsily around the middle to retain all the air possible in the upper half of it. Evidently, some acid had eaten away the lower half of the man's body after he had suffocated. The face was that of a Norwegian. By one outstretched hand, a small notebook lay open with the leather back upward. The corners of several pages were turned under carelessly. Nat swung the torch around the room. It was bare. The notebook, quickly he picked it up. The page on which the writing began was dated May 10, 2040, about 2 months ago. Helmar Swenson. My daughter Helena, age 19, and I were lured into the maw of this hellish monster by a robot calling for help in our television screen. This thing, known to man as Asteroid Moira, is in actuality one of the gigantic mineral creatures which inhabited a planet before it exploded, forming the asteroids. Somehow it survived the catastrophe and, forming a hard crustaceous shell about itself, has continued to live here in space as an asteroid. It is apparently highly intelligent and has acquired an appetite for human flesh. The singing spheres act as its sensory organs, separated from the body and given locomotion. It uses these to lure victims into its stomach in the first cave. I escaped its lure at first because of the squeaker I carried with me. We set up these 2 doors as a protection from the beast while we stayed here to examine it, but the monster got me when I fell and the squeaker was broken. My daughter rescued me after the acid of the pool had begun eating away my flesh. My Helena is locked in the room opposite this one. She has food and water to last until July 8th. Oxygen seeps in here somehow. The beast wants to keep her alive until it can get her out of the room to devour her. Here the writing became more cramped and difficult to read. I have put the key in my mouth to prevent the spheres from opening the door should they force their way into this room. Someone must come to save my Helena. I can't breathe. The writing ended in a long scrawl angling off the page. The pencil lay some distance from the body. July 8th, but that had been almost a week ago. He unscrewed the man's helmet, tried to pry the jaws open. They would not move. The airless void surrounding the tiny planetoid had frozen the body until now it was as solid as the quartz cave walls. But there was but one thing to do. The other door must be melted down. He leaped halfway across the room toward the door in the opposite wall. Could it be possible that he was in time? Anxiously, he flung a bolt of energy from his heat rod toward the lock, holding a flashlight under the other stump of an arm. The molten metal flowed to the floor like a rivulet of lava. The door, hanging off balance, screeched open. Air swooshed past him in its sudden escape from the room. He squeezed himself through, peered carefully about to see a slim spacesuit start to crumple forward in a corner. The girl was alive. He started toward her. The slim figure pulled itself erect again. He saw a drawn, emaciated face behind the helmet. Then, with a fury that unnerved him, she whipped out a heat rod, shot a searing bolt in his direction. He felt the fierce heat of it as it whizzed past his shoulder. In his brain, Digger's thoughts of attack came to him. He flung an arm around the spacehound, dragged it back as he withdrew toward the door. The girl continued to fire bolt after bolt straight ahead, her eyes wide and staring. They made the door, waited outside while the firing within continued. When at last it was still within, he peered around the corner of the room. She lay in a crumpled heap in the corner. Quietly, he re-entered, picked her up awkwardly. Through the thin, resistant folds of the spacesuit, he could feel the warmth of her, but could not tell whether the heart still beat or not. They would have to take her to one of the ships. Her limp form was held tightly under his good arm as Nat hurried down the main tunnel. Digger apparently realized the seriousness of the situation, for he received the impressions of "must hurry" from the beast and another creature, looking much like him, surrounded by small creatures of the same type, trapped in a crevice. "Aren't you a bit premature, old fellow?" he chided. Halfway there, the globes met them again. The things were not singing. From their many eyes poured a fierce, angry blue light. They rolled with a determination that frightened him. Yet he strode on until they were barely a foot away. "Jump, Digger!" The spheres stopped short, reversed their direction toward the little group at a furious rate, flinging out long, whip-like tentacles. One wrapped itself around Nat's ankle, drew him down. He shifted the limp form over to his shoulder, slipped out his heat rod. Quickly, the tentacle was severed. But now others took their place. He continued firing at them, making each bolt tell, but the numbers were too great. Digger sprang into action, rending the globes with those claws that were capable of tearing the hulls of spaceships. But tentacles lashed around him from the rear, snaked about him so that he was helpless. The girl was slipping off Nat's shoulder. He could not raise the stump of an arm to balance her. It was stiff and useless. He stopped firing long enough to make the shift, even as the spheres attacked again. The bolts had put out the lights in fully half the marauders, but the others came on unafraid. Nat straddled Digger's writhing body, held the space hound motionless between his legs. At short range, he seared off the imprisoning tentacles, knowing that it would take far more than a heat bolt to damage the well-nigh impregnable creature. He swooped the dog up under his good arm and fled from the madly pursuing spheres, thanking nameless deities that the gravity here permitted such Herculean feats. The spheres rolled faster, he soon found, than he could jump. So long as he was above them, all was well, but by the time the weak gravity permitted him to land, they were waiting for him. He tried zigzagging. Good, it worked. He eluded them up to the mouth of the cave, then jumped for the door of his ship's outer airlock. Nat placed the girl in his bunk, removed the cumbersome spacesuit. Her eyes blinked faintly, then sprang open. But they did not see him. They were staring straight ahead. Her mouth opened and shut weakly, as though she were speaking, but no sound issued from it. He brought her water, but when he returned, she had fallen asleep. He returned to the kitchen to prepare some food. "You're still running around in that pillowcase," he remarked to Digger as he extracted the space hound from it. "Attend me now. We know why and how those people disappeared. It would take the Space Patrol ship at least a month to arrive here. I don't intend to perch on the back of this devil as long as that. And if we leave, old thing, it'll just lure other chivalrous fools to very unpleasant ends. And we've got to get this kid back to civilization. She needs a doctor's care, preferably a doctor with 2 arms." Digger's vibrations were one of general approval. "We could poison it," he went on. "Only I'm not a chemist. Even if I knew the compounds contained in that reeking stomach, I wouldn't know what would destroy them. Might blow it up, but we haven't enough explosive. No, we'll have to get down into the thing's insides again. In fact—" he paused suddenly, mouth open. "Congratulate me, Digger. I have it." The smell of burning vegetables cut short his soliloquy. He fed the starved, half-blind girl, then left her sleeping exhaustedly as he squirmed into his suit. No sooner had he entered the mouth of the cave than a half-dozen of the singing sensory organs rolled quickly, yet not angrily, toward him. The beast was apparently optimistic, for the globes sang their most soothing, seductive tones. They tried to herd him into the first cave on the right, but he had remembered the squeaker. They could not distract him. Effortlessly, he leaped over them toward the mouth of the cave on the left. That was where the spaceships lay, pointing in all directions, like a carelessly dropped handful of rice. All the ships were in running order. Good. Had there been one vessel he could not move, then all was lost. The fuel in several ran low, but after a few moments of punching levers and pulling chokes, the under-rockets thundered in the big room. Taking care not to injure the motor compartments of the other ships, using only the most minute explosion quantities, he jockeyed each ship around until all their noses pointed in one direction. The exhausts pointed out through the wide doorway. It was well that the beast had formed curved corners in the room, otherwise the scheme would not have worked. The exhausts, which did not point toward the door directly, were toward the curved walls which would deflect the forceful gases expelled doorward. When he emerged from the ship, the spheres attacked. He seared off their tentacles throughout what seemed to be eternities. His body was becoming a mass of bruises from the lash of their tentacles. He burned his way through the swarm onto ship after ship. As he stepped from the last vessel, there was a rumbling beneath his feet. Did the monster understand his intent? Was it stirring in its shell? Most of the globes had disappeared. Now, a nauseatingly sweet odor penetrated the screen in his headpiece, which permitted him to smell without allowing the oxygen to escape. He hurried around to the rear of the ship, an apprehensive, sickening feeling at the pit of his stomach. A thick, jelly-like wave of liquid was rolling over the floor, the reeking, deadly juices from the beast's stomach. If the liquid touched him, it would eat through the heavy fabric, exploding the air pressure from around his body. How was he to escape from the cave? The answer came to him suddenly. Quickly, he darted back toward the nearest vessel. 2 of the screaming spheres blocked his way. He sent bolt after searing bolt into them, more of a charge than he had given any of the others. The lights in the globes went out. Their voices ceased, and they burst into slowly mounting incandescence. Yet they were not consumed by their fire, only glowed an intense white light like that of a lighthouse. Lighthouse! The word flashed through his mind clearly, strongly. They glowed like the zirconia lights of a lighthouse. Why hadn't he recognized the greasy, quartz-like material before? It was zirconia, a compound of zirconium, of course. A silicate-based creature could easily have formed a shell of it about itself. Zirconia, one of the compounds he'd intended prospecting for on the moons of Saturn, worth over $100 per pound. Because of its resistance to heat, it was used to line the tubes of rockets. Terra's supply had long been used up. Here was a fortune all around him, but that fortune was about to be destroyed, he along with it, if he did not hurry. If he could only reach the timing mechanism to yank from it the wires connecting it to the other ships. It was at the other end of the line. He started in that direction, but a surge of fatal, thick acid rolled before him, reaching for him with hungry, questing tongues. When it was almost touching his toes, he leaped. As he floated toward the floor, he placed a chair beneath him so that his feet landed on the seat. The legs of the chair sank slowly into the liquid. Again he leaped, his moment retarded by the fluid which now reached halfway up the chair legs, sucked and clung there. The sweetly evil-smelling stuff was rising rapidly. But the next leap carried him into the main cave. Abandoning the chair, he leaped once more, out through the cave's mouth, pursued by the waving tentacles of the sensory spheres. He had lost precious minutes eluding the deadly acid. It would take at least 5 minutes to get his ship away from the asteroid. He must hurry before all those rocket motors were thrown into action, or it would be too late. Leap and leap again. It seemed ages, but he reached the ship, bolted the door shut. Thumps against the door as the pursuing globes ran up against it. A thought came to him. Swiftly, he opened the door, permitted a few of them to enter, then slammed it shut. With the heat gun, he sheared off their tentacles. He could sell the zirconia in the entities. Then he turned to the controls, and the ship zoomed up and out. Nat had barely raised his ship from the asteroid Moira when he saw the small planetoid lurch suddenly, bounding off its orbit at almost a right angle. The sudden combined driving force of all the rockets within the cave had sent it hurtling away like a rocket itself. The asteroid housing the monster was heading into the Flora group of asteroids. There, the 57-odd solid bodies of that group would grind, crack, and rend that dangerous beast into harmless, dead fragments. "A good job," said a weak but softly friendly voice behind him. He whirled. The girl stood in the doorway of the pilot room, supporting herself against the door frame. Digger rubbed thoughtfully against her legs. "We'll just follow that asteroid, miss," he said, "and see if we can't pick up some odd fragment of zirconia when it's smashed in the grindstone there. Then we'll light out for Terra." She smiled. Earth, to him, seemed like a very good place to go as soon as possible. The end of The Beast of Space by F. E. Hardart.
was not able to find out anything about our author. I doubt his real name was F.E. Hardart. The Comet was a pulp magazine which published a total of 5 issues from December of 1940 to July of 1941. They paid 1 cent per word to their authors, which was higher than some of the competing magazines. However, they failed to sustain the magazine while it gained circulation. Less than a year later, it was canceled. Kind of sad, really, because the stories from those 5 editions were pretty amazing. First, let me say, oops. I love a good retraction, and Mason Willis from New York spotted my mistake. In episode 329, I incorrectly called author Tom Godwin as Tom Goodwin. I did this several times and even typed his name wrong in the show notes. My apologies to all and to the Godwin family. I'm starting a brand new project here at the podcast. We get a lot of stories from you guys on the show, but many of you write and say that you don't have a story to tell. Now, I have trouble believing that, but that's okay. How would you like to write a fiction story for the podcast? That's right, your story does not have to be true to be good. Here's my idea. Of course, if you already have written a short story, I would love to have it. But if you're up for a challenge, how about you use the contact page at ronsamazingstories.com and tell me that you want to write a story. I will give you a concept and you run with it. I will even help edit your story to make it the best it can be. When you're done, you send it back and whiz bang boom, you or I will read your work on the show. Now, if you think this sounds like something you want to try, then head to ronsamazingstories.com and contact me. I can't wait for someone to be the first to take this challenge. Did you know about Ron's Amazing Stories, the Amazon Echo skill? To activate the skill on your Echo, simply say, "Activate Ron's Amazing Stories." Now there is one little catch to this. For right now, you can only use the Echo skill in the United States. I've been told that will change, and you folks in Canada are the next to get the new skill. So check often. Other countries will follow, and I will keep you posted. Ron's Amazing Stories is also an on-air radio show. We're on every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Pacific. That's 11 p.m. Eastern. Coming in October of 2018, the radio show and the podcast will be parting company. In other words, for the most part, they will no longer have the same content. Stay tuned for more information or this week's blog. Also, for stations in your area, head to amfm247.com. That is the podcast. Coming up in future programs, we'll have a visit from Mark Nelson, who is the guy that's been reading a lot of the stories you have heard lately. Also coming up is the Horror Express number 21 with Jason and myself, and the topic will be Out of Body. No set date on that just yet. If you do want to follow the podcast or the blog, it's easy to do. Just head to ronsamazingstories.com, and there you'll find all of the links you'll need. We are on Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and so many other services. Pick one and do leave feedback about the show. It really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.